This week on In Post, we're going to process a shot from Carlsbad, California. Hi everyone, my name is Scott Davenport and welcome back to In Post, a little series where I will process an image, usually from the previous In the Field episode for the same week. So you kind of get the whole feel of going out to the shoot with me on In the Field and then what goes into producing the final image back in the studio. And this week we're continuing with the Carlsbad, California shoot. Really wonderful shoot, had a really nice, calm, serene, relaxed time there. And this shot we're going to look at today, it's really one of the favorite ones I've taken this year so far. Just that was a nice, very long exposure and very simple composition. It just came out looking really, really nice. So without further ado, let's go over to the computer. We'll bring that photo in and do some stylization. So here I am in Aperture, and this is the photo straight out of the camera. Right off the bat, this is already looking very, very nice, and it's not going to need a lot of work. The first thing I did was a little exposure adjustment, just to bring up the highlights so that these white clouds in the back approach pure white. So you can watch the shift in the histogram before and after, just shifting things to the right to make sure I capture all those brights. And then similarly, I played with the black point, lowering it just a little bit. So just these, really deep shadows in between the rocks are pure black. Now the next thing is chromatic aberration. This happens a lot at wide angles and in high contrast areas, like where these rocks meet the sky. You zoom in here, and you can see there's this color fringe on a couple of areas of the rocks. And so by adjusting these sliders in Aperture, I can get rid of that. Other programs can do this automatically with lens profiles, and that's something I don't have yet, and I'm looking forward to that whenever I finally get out of Aperture. Now the last thing is tons of retouching, 487 strokes, and I'll show you what that's all about. Let me zoom in this dark area on the right-hand side. Now besides things like these obvious dust spots, I've got all these little spots of color. Now some of these things are stars that, this is over here, this is over the 3-minute exposure. And so I'm picking up a lot of light from stars, or I don't think I actually had any boats that moved through the frame. And then there's also some smaller dots that are just, color noise. With a longer exposure, you're going to get some noise, whether it was a particular reflection off of a wave at that moment during the 3 minutes or whatnot. But all of these little spots are here. And so, you just really kind of position your viewer in one corner of the photo, take care of all the spots, and methodically move your way all the way through until you've gotten rid of all of them. And you can see here, here's the after. Turn it off, spots and color noise, and turn it on. I did attempt to reduce some of this by using Aperture's noise reduction, which honestly is very poor. It does not do a very good job. And I did also played around with noise reduction in other programs as well, but it was making the image overall a little bit too soft. So I chose to invest the time and go through and just use the retouch brush to remove all of those little dots. So now this is ready to bring over into the Perfect Photo Suite to add just a little bit of stylization. Now in the Perfect Photo Suite, you'll notice if you were paying attention when I did the tidy up of things, I didn't clean up this lower left corner of the beach in Aperture, and that's because I prefer the tools in the Perfect Photo Suite to deal with this, and really the Magic Eraser is very good for these things, as well as the clone tool, depending on the amount of texture. Let me zoom into this area so we can see it here. And so you can see some of this, this texture, even though it's soft, because I haven't done sharpening. When I try to use, say, the Perfect Eraser, and I think it's going to work okay here for this guy. You see I've lost some of that texture. Let me undo that. Versus if I use the clone tool and take something from over here. Let me make sure I have my feather up kind of high. I'll do an Option click to take a sample, and you can see this little sample move around with me. And then I can paint over that area, and that gives me a much nicer blend. It doesn't look false, it doesn't look smeared or smudged like it would look with using the Retouch brush or if I use the eraser. And so I did that same type of thing through the rest of this beach area to clean out all of these little bits of stray seaweed that really aren't adding anything to what otherwise is a very peaceful and calm scene. So worked through all of those pieces and then ended up with, this is the final image. But let's go into effects, and then I'll explain why I finished off in enhance at the very end of this. Let's pop this over into effects first. Okay, so let's start at the bottom of our stack. So here you can see we've cleaned up this lower left corner of the beach, and the first thing I wanted to do was tone. So I'll click on tone, and this is setting the colors that I remember when I was on scene. It was much more twilight, a much more purplish hue, and you can see I've done nothing with the tones, the brightness, the contrast, just kept that completely flat. And I did boost up detail a little bit. That's primarily for these rocks. You're not going to get a whole lot of detail here. And also clarity, and that brought out some of these little bits of edges in the sky. If I bring that down a little bit, bring it back up, you can see some crispness in the sky there. And the color toning, so the way to get this twilight is to play with the color channels. So here you can see the red channel only in the highlights, boosting that up just a little bit, and then doing the reverse with the green, pulling it down a little bit. And for blue, just gave it a very nice gentle nudge that was to keep things a little deeper and a little more evening twilight type feel. And you will notice that there's a mask. I masked away the effect from the beach. Let me show you. If I were to clear the mask, reset, you're going to see the beach takes on this odd bluish purple tone, and that just doesn't make sense. The water wasn't flowing all the way up to this little segment of the beach. So let me undo that. You can see it just takes it away and leaves a more natural sand tone, and that looks really nice. Next is dynamic contrast, and this is really just a subtle touch, a little boost on the mediums and larges. Let me see if did I do anything in blending? No, everything's being applied everywhere. And I only wanted that applied to the upper half of the photo. Give some punch to these rocks, a little bit to the ocean here, but mainly for the sky. So you can see before, the sky looks a little bit flat, and after, just adds enough texture so you can see that those clouds, swooping across the sky, moving off to the horizon. Next was noise reduction, and this is a subtle one. So I don't know if we can see this here before or after on the video, but this was mainly to get rid of a little bit more of the noise that was in the scene, and I didn't really need it on the rocks themselves. A subtle thing doesn't really show up. Let me try and do a zoom here. We can see if this will come through on the video. So here we go. Before, actually you can probably see that pretty well. Here's without the noise reduction, and kind of look at the darker tones here. There's a fair amount of noise, and then after, that's just smoothing it out nicely. You'll also notice that some other spots have started to show up, and that's a result of some of the toning and contrast. So these are the reason I went back into enhance to finish things off. But finishing up in effects, color enhancer, move up to here, little subtle touch on vibrance, a little bit of saturation. That was really it, just to kick those purples up a little bit more before and after with that. And then finally a vignette, just to finish the whole thing off. Darken the corners just a little bit. Not too dark. I only pulled the brightness down a little bit. Played with the size and the feather. If you see my other videos, you'll see my technique for doing this. Lower the feather to 0, something like that. You can see where the vignette is, and it's just on the corners here, here, and so forth. And then once you've got your size fixed, bring the feather back up to where you like it. So that's the stylization. So let me now get over into enhance, and we can take a look at the very last little step that I did there. All right, so here in Enhance, looking at all of the different, quick fixes and color and tone, I'm doing nothing over here at all. Why I came back into Enhance was to deal with a few more of those little spots that showed up as a result of adding contrast. And also for this rock over at the very edge, there was some graffiti on the rock here. I'll zoom in and see if we can see that there. And it's still kind of there. I was using the perfect eraser and the retouch brush to kind of work through these things and attempt to smooth that out a little bit, just so that it wasn't as prevalent in the scene. And you can get the idea here using that, trying out the eraser as well. Let's try this. It looks like somebody put a date here, 2000 something or other. Swooping through there, that one doesn't look good. But to smooth this out a little bit so that ultimately it just looked like a black rock. So at the end of it all, we had a final image that I really am happy with. It came out very nice. So in the end, the amount of retouching was probably the major part of it. Just getting rid of all the either color spots or a few little bits of starlight that did actually leak through in the long exposure, which I didn't want. I wasn't going for star trails. I was going for smooth surfaces of water and nice drift in the clouds. So that took a fair amount of time just to touch all those things away. It's not difficult. It's just attention to detail. And the rest of it was very simplistic. A little touch up on the rocks to make those pop a little bit, and then everything else just smooth it out and give it a bit more of a twilight feel. That does it for In Post this week. Hope you picked up a trick or two that you can use on your own photos. And speaking of your own photos, you got something cool, please share it with me. You can find me on Twitter, on Google+, on Facebook, Flickr. I'm all over the place. Leave comments through my website. That'll hit me directly in email, and I'm very sure to see those comments. And just share your work. Let's see what you got. I'd like to see how these tutorials are helping you make better images. Until next time, bye.